Heroic couplet may be defined as a pair of rhymed lines with iambic pentameter. In ordinary composition of poetry, when two successive lines that have same rhyme scheme and employ the same meter are called a couplet. A heroic couplet is a specific type of couplet that discusses heroic themes and that usually takes iambic pentameter. For example, in the lines, know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man. The lines have been taken from Alexander Pope's essay on man, are a good example of heroic couplet. Now the question arises why heroic couplet is used in poetry. The rhyming couplets are usually used in poetry in order to make a poem interesting and rhythmic. And they certainly help to create a rhyming effect in a poem and make them an interesting reading and recitation. The heroic couplet consists of two iambic pentameter lines rhyming together. It is called heroic because iambic pentameter verse was earlier used for a specific type of poetry, epic poetry or heroic poetry. That is why the name heroic has been applied. It is called couplet because two consequent lines, means two lines in a sequence, two successive lines, have the same rhyme. That is, they rhyme in pairs like AA, BB, CC, and so on. Each line of the heroic couplet contains 5 feet, or in other words, 10 syllables because it is iambic pentameter. In iambic pentameter, each foot has 2 syllables, and the second syllable of each foot is stressed. So, the lines which are used in heroic couplets are iambic pentameter. The two lines of the couplet rhyme, and sometimes the rhyme may be single and the other time it may be double, but being double rhyme is not compulsory, only single rhyme is sufficient to make this poem a couplet. In the middle of each line there is a pause. Technically this pause is called caesura. This pause generally falls after the 4th and before the 6th syllable. In each heroic couplet there is a pause at the end of the first line, means in 2 lines, in the unit of 2 lines, there is a pause at the end of the first line. This pause at the first line is indicated by a comma, which signifies the partial completion of the sense, that the sense which is to be narrated in 2 lines, it completes partially in the first line, and this is indicated by comma. There is a pause at the end of the couplet, means when the couplet completes, there is another pause. This pause is indicated by a full stop. This full stop signifies full completion of the sense. Means the idea which is to be given in two lines completes with this full stop which occurs at the end of the second line. The couplet is often complete in itself in meaning, and a couplet does not require any help of either a predecessor or a successor to complete its meaning. In other words, the couplet is a complete unit in itself and it conveys a complete thought, and it does not require help of any of the previous lines or the following lines. For example, the lines which are taken from William Shakespeare's poem, which is sonnet number 18. The title of the poem is "Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day?" So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. These two lines are actually the final couplet from William Shakespeare's very famous sonnets, "Shall I Compare Thee?" And this is a great example of the function of a final couplet in English type of sonnets. The couplet here provides a lovely conclusion to the poem, but is also a wonderful standalone message for the importance of literature. Let us read further some of the historical aspects of heroic couplet. The heroic couplet is an important meter as far as English poetry is concerned. The use of heroic couplet has varied from time to time and from author to author. Historically, a number of writers have used heroic couplet in their compositions, in their poems, but they have introduced some variations in their own styles. Most of the poetry of the Augustan age in the history of English literature, most of the poetry of the Augustan age is cast in this meter, and heroic couplet was most correctly practiced by Alexander Pope and John Dryden in the entire range of English poetry. In this context, Geoffrey Chaucer's name is very important. Geoffrey Chaucer in the 14th century was the first to make extensive use of heroic couplet. And in the later ages, the heroic couplet became the principal meter which was used in drama somewhere in the mid of the 17th century. And later, this form of heroic couplet was perfected by John Dryden and Alexander Pope in the late 17th and in early 18th century, which is also known as the Augustan age. In this age, in the neoclassical age, it became the dominant meter and was used for drama, satire, even descriptive and in narrative poetry. Dryden used the heroic couplet in his words, who is one who is a very important writer of his time. And Dryden gave heroic couplet an additional energy, an additional vigor, a new elegance, and a noble rhythm and beauty. It was left until Alexander Pope to perfect the heroic couplet. Alexander Pope used heroic couplet in all his significant poems, such as The Rape of the Lock, The Dunciad, Essays on Man, and in Essays on Criticism. Pope was the most skilled master of the closed couplet, a type of couplet which we will discuss in the later part of this video. He was the skilled master of the closed couplet and conveyed the sense vigorously in the packet of 2 lines. Pope used the heroic couplet with great metrical skill, with variation of speed and a delicacy of touch, and made his couplets quite memorable. Heroic couplet was used with rare brilliance and effect for satirical and intellectual poetry by Alexander Pope. In the later ages, the excessive refinement led to a kind of monotony and rigidity, and heroic couplet was not as popular as it was popular in the age of Dryden and in the age of Alexander Pope. The heroic couplet may be of 2 kinds: closed heroic couplet and run-on heroic couplet. In the closed couplet, the sense, the idea, is completed with each couplet, and each couplet in this way forms a complete sentence, a unit in itself, whereas in the run-on couplet, the sense runs on from one couplet to another till it is completed. It means the poem, the words appears to be couplet in rhyme scheme, but the idea does not confine in 2 lines. The idea runs on in the following lines. If a couplet has the ability to stand apart from the rest of the poem, it is independent, and hence it is called a closed couplet. And if the idea runs on in the following lines, then it becomes a run-on couplet. Let us read a very good example of closed couplet. The lines from an essay on criticism which was written by Alexander Pope. He says, "A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pyrean spring. Their shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again. Fired at first sight with what the muse imparts, in fearless youth we tempt the heights of arts." This extract, some lines which are taken from an essay on criticism by Alexander Pope, is a very good example of closed heroic couplets. In these lines, all the couplets make complete sense, meaning they do not carry their sense into the following lines, and the couplets are also rhyming. Let's see another example of run-on couplet. These lines are from the Canterbury Tales, which was written by Geoffrey Chaucer in 14th century. He says, "One that April with the showered suit, the drought of March hath pursed to the root, and bathed every vein in switch liquor, of which virtue engendered in his flower. When Zephyrus eke with his sweet breath inspired hath in every holt and heath tender crops, and the young sun hath in the ram his halskers run. These lines, the poetic piece which is taken from the Canterbury Tales written by Geoffrey Chaucer, is an example of open heroic couplets, means run-on couplets, that have iambic pentameter written in the rhyme scheme of AA, BB, CC and so on in this pattern, but they are not closed couplets. All the lines rhyme, they do not give independent meanings in a single line, and the sense is carried to the subsequent lines. So, this was all about heroic couplet, the history of heroic couplet and the examples of heroic couplet in English literature. If you have found this video useful, please press like. Thank you.